Good afternoon. Half a day. The Committee on Housing, Utilities, Public Safety, and Homeland Security will now convene this oversight hearing regarding the Department of Corrections Visitors Protocol, Contraband, and General Safety Measures. For the record, today is January 30th, 2018, and it is currently 2:03 p.m. In accordance with open government law, public notices were sent out via email to all senators, stakeholders, and main media broadcasting outlets on Monday, January 22nd, 2018, and on Thursday, January 25th, 2018. At this moment, I'd like to acknowledge the speaker for joining us today, and for the record, the Department of Corrections panelists that are here have also been sworn in. At this time, I believe the Department of Corrections does have a PowerPoint presentation that they'd like to present first, and so we'll offer that. At the end of the presentation, we will open the floor up for questions and then go down with further questioning. So Director Lamarena, can you please have everyone just introduce themselves and their role at Department of Corrections? Thank you, sir.
Lieutenant Lizama, Adult Correctional Facility.
Captain May Kirwa, Operations Commander.
Colonel Alan Bora, Prison Security Administrator.
Captain Anton Oglen, Internal Affairs, also Special Projects.
Tony Lamarena, Director, DOC.
Kate Baltazar, Deputy Director of DOC.
Teresa Tayama, Casework and Counseling Services Division Administrator.
Dr. Patricia Timinglow, Clinical Psychologist.
Ronald Santos, Acting Chief, Parole Services Division.
Thank you very much. And now we can move forward with the PowerPoint presentation. And I believe Director Lamarena, you'll be presenting the presentation, yes?
Thank you, Senator. To expedite the time, rather than having each of the division heads speak on their portion, I'll just do the whole presentation and then open up for questions. So Ryan, go ahead to the first slide. Let's see. Okay, go ahead. Okay, just to give you a brief overrun, because it's been about a year since we last came before you, what currently is happening at DOC. So in January 2017, we had 235 officers. As of January of this year, we have 200 officers. We've had 35, we've lost 35 officers in the year through attrition. Next slide. Okay, DOC has approximately, we had the same number of officers many years ago when we had a population of 350 to 400. Currently, we're running about 650 to 700 inmates and detainees today with the same number of officers. We also had, at the time, 20 caseworkers. Today, we have 5. And as far as support staff and admin, I have 3 admin staff at this time. Next slide, Ryan. Okay, we have 66 officers to support for each shift, and we have various posts that we put them in. We have transport, we have the visitor section, and transport, we approximately have about 20 runs per day, and these are for medical, dental, behavioral, likewise with the court runs as well. We have 7 stationed at the Visitor Processing Center. We have daily visitation, approximately 30 to 50 visitors a day, which include vendors, lawyers, families, service providers, faith-based, and volunteers, and so forth. We also have officers assigned to PayTel, safety, special watch, forensic, recreation, Mandania Task Force, Homeland, training, supply intake, property, and library. Next slide. The other units, we have 6 in VRS, 6 in Parole, 5 in Hub, 4 in Operations, 3 Internal Affairs, 2 Limited Term Disability, 2 Military Leave, and 2 in the Director's Office. Next slide. We have a total of 134 officers total at the main facility, And we have 6 to 10 officers off duty due to the RDO, sick leave, or drill. 124 officers remain deployable to monitor 700 prisoners, 10 housing units, 2 facilities in Manilo and Hagatna. We have 3 shifts, Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie, and we just moved to a 12-hour shift, 5 days on, 2 days off as a result of the shortage. Next slide. As you can see, our command staff, unlike our other brothers and sisters in public safety, our command staff is very limited, and these are things that we need to address. Currently, I only have 1 colonel, which is the warden, 2 captains, 1 lieutenant, and 2 sergeants. I have detailed other sergeants for the purposes of being platoon commanders at the various shifts. Okay, next slide. In the hub, where we book and release, approximately 4,000 prisoners are booked and released through the hub each year. Average 12 to 15 per day. New arrestees, repeat offenders, parole violators, contempt of court, Safe Streets Act confines. This number has doubled in the last 10 years. Next slide. Community engagement, Post 9 halfway house, community corrections, grounds maintenance of GDOE schools, ground maintenance support. We support the mayors and various needs within their villages. We do all the Island Beautification Task Force projects, scenic routes throughout the island. We also support various other government agencies with their landscaping. This translates into hundreds of thousands of dollars when you calculate that and how many man hours are put in. We've provided you a list, Senator, of at least the last 6 months of the various projects that we've done around the island. Okay, next slide. Okay, the Special Operations Response Team. We put this program together primarily to assist the officers on post in case of any incidents that may happen, and the duties include random security searches, respond to prisoner disturbances, facility security searches, conduct census count, prisoner evaluations, prisoner high-risk escorts, staff security checks, conduct arrest and apprehensions, facility emergencies, natural or man-made, security shakedowns, cell extractions, hostage recovery, riots, prisoner security alerts, and off-island transport. Next slide. We have 18 housing units, post 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 16. And these in this slide, it shows the various types of individuals that are housed in each one. 2 is primarily behavioral and forensic. 3 is medical. 4 is medical. 5 is administrative. 6 is special housing unit. 7 is administrative housing unit. 8 is female unit. 9 is community corrections center. 16 medium. Next slide. Both 17, 18, 24, 25, 25A, 28, 29. 2017 is 3 cubicles with a 60-bed capacity. Post 18, 5 rooms with a 70-bed capacity. Post 24, 10 cells, 3 cubicles, 52-bed capacity. Post 25, Dome 2, which is a 50-bed capacity. 25A, which is a non-medically cleared Dome 1, 50-bed capacity. 28, residential substance abuse treatment. And post 29 is the Dome 3, which is 50-bed capacity. Hagatna, post 30, has 92 beds. On the local side, on the federal side, it has 38 beds. Next slide. Education and training. Education and training, especially since, we came on board, has been critical. I would like, really to have our training officer, Faye Sanchez, to come up and speak on the training, because she's really put together a great training program in regards to the GCC apprenticeship program, also follow-up training for our officers through the year. So, Officer Sanchez, why don't you go ahead and grab a mic? Just grab the mic at the end. Grab a chair. Introduce yourself, Senator. Officer.
Good afternoon, Senators. In the past, we started off with 14 apprenticeship courses. To date, we now have 13 apprenticeship courses. Since 2011, we had 9 cycles. Our upcoming trainings, for this year, we have the OCAT, the active shooter, verbal judo, and combative training. What else?
May I add, Senator, that we also sent 2 of our officers off island for instructor courses, and they've brought back a wealth of knowledge on tactical enforcement. So those are training that we're currently providing to our line officers. As well as many of the pocket training that we conduct during our briefings. We conduct pocket briefings almost daily with in reference to like basic corrections, common mistakes made by correction officers, everything pertinent to the function of a correction officer. We also have been working closely with Dr. Taimloon, providing substance abuse awareness training for our staff as well. So it's an ongoing process, training every day.
Yeah, we also conduct training with the Guam Hospital for basic life support. So we try to train our officers as much as possible when necessary. In regards to contraband, we'll have Captain Uggan, who is Internal Affairs, discuss about contraband.
Good afternoon. In regards to contraband...
Just a minute. Director, is that a new slide, or are you staying on...
Oh, next slide. Next slide, Ryan.
Okay, in regards to contraband, one thing we've done differently now is that when we find major contraband like cell phones and drugs, instead of keeping it in the prison itself, stored in another room, we are now turning everything over to GPD. So, of course, there's a police report that is generated. If it's found in a common area, it's just taken to them for safekeeping. If it's found on an inmate, we have the inmate arrested and charged again. Because of that, we've seen actually a decrease in the number of inmates possessing cell phones now because they're going to be charged. Also, every shift is doing daily shakedowns. Every shift does shakedowns. Sometimes it's the whole unit, sometimes it's just pockets of the unit, certain cells. They're doing shakedowns. Even our SORT team now does random shakedowns. So overall, we've seen a decrease actually in contraband. Okay, and it's just because of our due diligence of keeping up with these shakedowns. Yeah, it's not. It says 200 daily, but it's not.
Yeah,
that's a typo. About three a day, and now that we got 2 shifts. It'll probably be at least minimum of 2 a day per shift, and that's including Agana and the Manila facility.
I think that reads 200 over the last 120 days.
Okay. Yeah, it says 200 over the last 120 days. Yeah, so we really have jumped up on the shakedowns.
Yeah. So what we've done is and these are unscheduled, unannounced shakedowns. Usually, it's the platoon commander that makes that call. I'm not even aware of what areas are being shaken down that day or that evening. And again, because of our collaboration with the Guam Police Department, we turn everything over now to GPD. It's one reason why it's very visible in the media now, because it's blotted for every major contraband that we do find. In the past, it was primarily handled internally, and discipline was handled internally. But with better collaboration with the Guam Police Department and the Mandanya Task Force, as you can see, there were major arrests as a result of some contraband found at DOC. We've got individuals who, although may be incarcerated, are still operating a drug business outside of the prison. So our working very closely with GPD has been very successful. Next slide. Okay, casework. I'm going to turn this over to Teresa. So Teresa is our casework supervisor, and she's done fantastic work over in her division. Next slide.
So, good afternoon. So I oversee the Casework and Counseling Division, and we have several community-based partnerships that are noted there. First thing we started as far as working aside the judiciary is the reentry court. We have implemented or have begun to and are receive training in the ORAS risk assessment system. We also offer adult education classes alongside GCC. We have the Mother Read, Father Read program through the Guam Humanities Council. And as a matter of fact, we have a cycle ongoing right now, which is in their second week. We had through the Residential Substance Abuse Treatment Program, we were able to offer the Creative Inside Jury Art program, working along with CAHA. There's also the Healthy Families, Healthy Relationships program through West Care. We have the DOC Trades Academy, which is basically a collaboration between the Guam Trades Academy, the Department of Labor, Women in Construction, and the Department of Public Works. Moving along the Corrections Public Works program, we have 6 inmates who are going to be trained in the use of the backhoe, and we're going to be working along, helping out around in that area. We have praise and worship services through the Ministerial Association, and then the Residential Substance Abuse Program, which is a collaboration with non-governmental organizations. And then we have the Agriculture Project, which is our farm and our piggery. Next slide. The number of inmates served since the new fiscal year has been through the Adult Education Program, GED, 36, 9 through the Mother Read, Father Read, and we currently have another 7, so we can make that 7 plus 9 is 16. 17 through the Creative Inside Jewelry Art Program. We don't have an ongoing cycle right now with West Care, so none served thus far. The Trades Academy, we had the Corrections Public Works Program. There are 6 inmates. Praise and Worship, about 50% of our population. RSAT recently graduated 17 clients. The Halfway House, post 9, we have 32. And then the Agriculture Project. Next slide. We currently are using these 4 evidence-based training programs. We have the matrix model, which is what is used in the RSAT program. We have moral recognition training, to which we have 28 clients engaging in that. The sex offender treatment program, or what we call CBISO, with 6 inmates current. And I want to give credit to our senior social worker, Mark Perez, for having gone off island to receive training. And this is the first sex offender treatment being offered at DOC. So we are really proud of that. And then we have Thinking for a Change, where we recently graduated 7 clients from that program about 2 weeks ago. And that's a collaboration with Guam Reentry Court. Next slide. Those are just some statistics regarding the education level of our population. We have a little over half who have no high school education, 35% do, and then 6% have a GED. We only have 4% of inmates who currently have at least some college, and that's it as far as higher education. Next slide. Thank you.
Okay, and we'll have Ron go over the acting chief for the Parole Services Division.
Good afternoon, Senators. My name is Ron Santos. I oversee the operation of Parole. Currently, we have a staff of 6, 1 chief, and 1 parole officer 3, 3 parole officer 2, and 1 parole officer 1. Our current population current parolees are 363 out in the community, and 440 inmates, which are the pre-parole. Parole programs, we have parole aftercare programs with Guam Aftercare with Ms. Taitano. We do our drug testing programs, and we help with various community service out in the community. Is there anything? Next slide.
Well, what we've also done in a lot of our programs is we've included them in the community service as well. And then we also put them in training programs to include the parolees. So, is Joanne here? Yes. So we're going to call up Joanne Rivera, who is the representing Guam Memorial Hospital, to discuss medical. And then after... Here.
Good afternoon, Speaker, Senator. I'm a GMH employee that's assigned to oversee the Department of Corrections Clinic. And in terms of the clinic, there's a Hagatna clinic and there's also a Mangilao clinic. The hours for those is from 6 a.m. to 11:30 p.m. for Mangilao and 6 to 7 for Hagatna. The services that we provide, we offer medical services, which is acute for patients that require immediate attention, and chronic care for the ones that have, chronic long medical problems that require follow-up. We also participate in discharge planning to ensure that, they get comprehensive and continuity of care once they leave our facility, because oftentimes they're very sick and require medications, and they're indigent. Specialty care referrals, pharmacy services. We also compile and maintain medical records. We coordinate with dental health for dental services, with mental health, as well as Guam behavioral health for their psychiatric needs, also for eyeglasses services, and we also coordinate lab services. In terms of our staff, we have a medical director, a clinic administrator, clinic provider, clinic supervisor, clinic charge nurse, comprised of registered nurses, licensed practical nurses, ward clerks, and 1 pharmacy technician. In terms of monthly average statistics for 2017, for the total that we received and screened for arrestees, there's 273. For sick calls, 651 total. In terms of medical referral, 25. Medical sick calls, 266. Physical exams that are performed is 90, and specialty care referrals are 137. For mental health referrals, mental health sick calls, which are referred to Dr. Taiminglo, 75. Mental health referrals are 60. We also have dental sick calls, which is 55 in a month. Dental referrals are also 55, which are sent over to public health. Other average monthly statistics that we've compiled, there's 244 other sick calls for various things, aside from medical, mental, or dental. Our total annual population average at the prison's about 750. Chronic care is 303. And then we coordinate various services, again, like I said, with dental, behavioral, also for emergency care, urgent care, hospitalization, again, with specialty care with different specialists. In terms of our challenges, safety and security is utmost because we really can't carry out our medical duties without having security officers that accompany the inmates or detainees to our facility. So whatever challenges that DOC face, it really impacts us and it cascades the problem and compounds the problem for medical. Also, access to community specialists. So although we have a regular physician who's a general practitioner, we also have a chronic internist who we refer over to Dr. Lizama. But for the most part, the other specialty care that we require is oftentimes have to be sent out of DOC, and oftentimes some of the specialists, they're not accessible for various reasons, or sometimes the specialists are just not on the island. Staff recruitment, retention, and training is also a challenge. Prison programs, we have social detox for drug and alcohol programs, but we don't have on the island, a drug rehab program, and that is really a problem for the whole island as well as DOC. Medical transport, we have very limited space. Because of our space capacity, we have to take turns, and so we have to alternate. When lab services are there, we can't conduct the clinic. If the dentists are there, again, we have to interrupt medical services because we share one facility. Also, equipment and supplies. So the bottom line is all of these, we just require more funding. And basically, that's, in a nutshell.
Calling Dr. Timinglo now to discuss the forensic and behavioral.
Okay, I believe there's a slide. So, Guam, do we have the slide? Yeah. Okay. Department of Corrections, like other facilities throughout the United States, correctional, jails and prisons, is it two? Okay, have become the extension of mental health centers throughout the United States. So individuals lacking social support, therapeutic services or access to it, serious substance use or addictions, lack of employment, housing, they're homeless. All of these individuals who have experienced trauma and so forth are at risk of confinement and reconfinement. Let's take a look at our numbers. The next slide, please. So this is just, these are the services that we provide. I think my slides are out of order here. So we provide a range of services. We have an active caseload of about 200, anywhere from 200 to 225. When we're looking at this, we have to think that these are just our patients. We provide services to people who are not necessarily requiring ongoing treatment. So we have an active caseload of about 115. One-to-one service, one-to-one services ranges. Our slides are really out of order. Okay, so referrals to Guam Behavioral. Prisoners' diagnosis with severe mental illness. These are really off. So prisoners requiring medication, we have about 220. Assessments, evaluations, about 35, and follow-up services. Next slide. We also have, on Guam, we have one of the highest suicide risks in the general population. Like other facilities throughout the United States, this is amplified when people are confined. And so one of our greatest efforts is to address and reduce the risk for suicide. We provide training to the officers annually. There are 2 trainings for suicide risk, including mental health training. Next slide. We actually, can we just go back? There's 2 slides that were skipped. Okay, it's all right. It's all right. We'll go forward. So going forward, I have my handy sheet here. One of the things that we look at is staffing. Currently, I'm the only qualified mental health provider, and I have a psych tech and 1 officer who's temporarily assigned. This is to provide services to over 500 inmates just for the month of December, and including the stats that were shown to you earlier. What is needed to provide the range of services that are needed include, you can have 1 qualified mental health practitioner, like 1 psychologist, but you also have the range of support staff. Access to, and Guam Behavioral has been wonderful in providing psychiatric services, but if we can have more access to them, that would be ideal. To assist, we've talked about telepsychiatry, and hopefully Guam Behavioral will secure psychiatrists that would serve Department of Corrections. In doing so, we also would like to have, I think ideally, a psychiatric nurse assigned. Social workers who work in clinical therapeutic roles would be ideal to provide programs, follow-up services. In the post, psychiatric social workers are licensed and license eligible would be ideal. We have psych techs. We have 1 psych tech, and we would need another one to run post 2, which is a behavioral/mental health unit. We don't have any administrative assistance, so we have to do all of those services that are required in that area. The clients that we get are oftentimes very stable, but during the week we have a large number of them that come in who are not stable, and we have to have a security officer present. And that's something that, with the staffing shortage for security impacts us greatly. So we've been very grateful that DOC's security has provided 1. We would like that to continue for the safety and security of not just the prisoners, but our staff. And thank you.
Okay, next slide, Ryan. Okay, Senators, just a quick point of view on the budget. Our FY18 budget request was $29.7 million. The actual appropriated was $26.6. Our primary increase from the 2017 budget to 2018 was primarily to cover 2 major costs. One was the MOU between GMH and DOC, and then the anticipated cost when we renegotiate our food services contract. So, it puts us in a major bind at this point in time, because, I'm stuck with of making the decision of funding safety and security versus GMH, and then once we put the bid out for food services, what those anticipated increases will be. We negotiated the food contract, I think 5 years ago. It was a 3-year contract with an option with 2 years. So those will exhaust this year. So we'll go out to bid again for that. So, currently, because we're in the beginning of the fiscal year, we're not feeling that financial pickle yet. But as the year goes, it's going to be a point where I need officers. Our main priority is safety and security. The courts, we have gone to the courts as a result of not providing necessary medical care. I hope we never get to that point again and go back to the courts again. So just to give you a general idea. Next slide. You know, when I first came on board in 2016 in June, I remember the speaker asked me, you know, are you going to cut overtime? I know we were tracking then in 2016, $3.2 million. In FY17, we spent just a little over $1 million. As a result of us hiring 36 officers, and we were able to curb overtime tremendously. But again, with the loss of 30-plus officers this year, those OT numbers will climb again for sure. And again, because of the budget constraints, it makes me difficult for me to recruit for additional officers. At this time, I'd like to turn this last slide over to our deputy to talk about ongoing projects and future projects.
Good afternoon, Speaker, Madam Chair. So currently at the Department of Corrections, we have our DOC master plan, and this master plan was funded by a grant written several years ago, and finally through the RFP process, it was awarded. And this is the first master plan that DOC is going to have since 1988, I believe, Captain Uggan, right? So with this master plan, we were awarded about $255,000 to assess the structure, the current footprint of the Department of Corrections as it stands in Manguilao, and how each area can be best used for future use and future planning with regard to growth in population and confinees, and adding areas for programs, education, vocational projects and such. So that is ongoing right now, and we're very excited that we hope to have that, at least a draft of it before the end of the year, because again, DOC has not had a master plan in 30 years. So I think just as time went on, the facility grew with space as space was required, but this is going to be able to tell us the best use of space and application of technology for modern corrections practice. The dome reskinning project is another federally funded project we're very excited about. As you know, the domes were built in the early 2000s to accommodate immigration confinees and have become a permanent part of our housing. 4 domes will be reskinned completely by March of this year, so we're very excited about that. The locking mechanism, again, mostly federal funds. I think 2.2 million are federal funds and 500,000 local funds, and this is in compliance with the federal consent decree that was lifted last year. The locking mechanisms will be replaced in post 6, 7, and 17, and include cameras as well. The backhoe certification project, as Ms. Tayama mentioned, is a partnership with GCA Trades Academy, Department of Labor, and will certify 5 males and 1 female in the use of heavy equipment. And this is a really interesting program because it's also a non-traditional career path for females that we are testing. And we're very excited that a female is going to be able to participate in this and be certified in something that she can have, as well as the other 5 male inmates upon release, and can gain gainful employment. The Post-8 Women's Program, in partnership with the National Association of Women in Construction Guam and Fu'una Rising, which is a committee of NAWIC. When I first came to DOC, there were very few offerings for the female inmates. And as a response to that, we reached out, and the response was tremendous in being able to provide certification programs for the female inmates. I believe 11 are being screened, will be screened by Dr. Timinglu. And so what that program is, it's a computer-based module, and it's for a construction industry technician certification. So it teaches everything from, basic math and writing project proposals, as well as project management and other construction industry related topics. So when these females are released from after full-time release, they will have a national certification designation that they can take to an employer to have gainful employment. And they can do this while they are in custody with us. In addition to that, there are psychoeducational programs that Dr. Timing Liu and Dr. Jaylene Kent will be offering as well. And those are the sort of the soft skills areas that are very much needed. Areas like self-esteem building, anger management, job readiness, and so forth. Recently, an MOU was signed with Guam Customs and Quarantine to train our correction officers to handle the drug detection dogs. So we're very grateful to the Guam Customs and Quarantine Agency, as they have partnered with us in the last year or so in our operations to detect drugs and contraband. Their workload is such, though, that oftentimes it's the handlers who are encumbered at other places, the ports, the airport especially. So what this MOU does is it allows CQA to do a train the trainer with our correction officers. And so when we would like to run an operation, our certified and trained correction officers will be able to pick the dogs up and run the operation in-house using our trained correction officers. The PRIA cameras, again, first since 1997. Typhoon Paka wiped out the cameras 20 plus years ago, and we were able, through the Department of Justice PRIA program, to install cameras. And there are more to come under PRIA funding in FY 18 and 19. We have begun the drafting of legislation for a corrections reserve unit. I think many of our law enforcement partners, agency partners, have some kind of a reserve unit, and it would be prudent for us to do so as well, to augment our staffing and our personnel. So we are in the process of drafting something that we hope that you will support also, because it will help us in augmenting our personnel for our uniform staffing, our numbers as needed. Our commissary legislation and prison industries, those are also coming early this year, and we hope to have that legislation finalized in the coming months.
Thank you. Is that all? Okay, thank you. I want to thank, first of all, the Department of Corrections and the officers for all their hard work. Also, the outstanding support that you've given the inmates in rehabilitation programs and in efforts to reducing recidivism. So thank you for that. And also thank you for presenting your current projects, because it shows that you are looking at ways to move forward. However, unfortunately, this is not what brings us here today. What brings us here today is the situations and the incidents that have been happening, and this seemed to be a growing trend of the constant assaults going on within Department of Correction, and also some of the standard operating procedures that could be improved. We reviewed some of your SOPs, and there are many questions that we have. And so before I go any further, more specifically, and also to ask clarification in some of your slides, I'd like to offer the speaker an opportunity if he has any questions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Director, if you pull back your slide that has the amount of money that you received, I think it's the one where you made a request. Your FY18 request was 29 and you got 26. And is that the $3 million shortfall that you talk about in the article today?
Yes, because of that, again, in our original request at 29 million was primarily, again, to cover the MOU. The prior year, remember, the money was taken through the Compact Impact funds, and those monies have since been expended, so we needed those additional funds primarily to cover the hospital costs, and then also the increase in food services.
And though you received 26 in your 18 request, Was that more or less than what you received in 25? I mean, in 17, in 16?
Because I came in halfway of 16, we did receive funding from DUI Compact, and that's what paid for the medical. That was the beginning of the medical clinic, and so.
But your overall funding for DOC went up.
I know that the 26 million that we got for this year, it was status quo from last year. Last year was 20.
Barely. Well,
was 26.
The previous year was 25.6.
Yeah, about 25, 26.
So you received an increase in the 17 budget. Did DOC have a 15% reserve? Were you subject to this?
We did, but I believe we actually cut into that 15%. We did close the year with a negative.
You ended the year with a
negative?
negative?
So I believe BBMR had to put some of the reserve in for us. Because I know that I know you're going to show me numbers. The last time you showed me that there was a surplus, but we'll have to call them BBMR because I don't know where they came in.
I understand, but I'm only dealing with numbers that I'm. Would you read the top of that, please? Where's that from?
The Consolidated Revenue Expenditure Report, General Fund.
For what month?
September.
Ending September 30, 2017.
Right.
Go down to DOC and please read into the record how much.
It says we have funds available of 1.7 million. And
I'm just saying that is the report. And it says that you had encumbrances of almost 800,000 that they had taken into account. So you ended the year, according to the CRER, now that's not my number, all right? Make it very clear. That is not my number. That was the number that Department of Administration, Department of Revenue and Taxation, and the Department of, on BBMR, all sign off in the front as being the CRER. You had 1.7 left on the table, and 800,000 in encumbrances that still had to be paid, that you had purchase orders or whatever at DOA. So you had an excess.
I know, Speaker, we talked about this during the budget hearings, and BBMR was there to explain, but, when we crunched our numbers on our end, If I saw these numbers, Speaker, and BBMR explained this to me, and showed me that I had $1.7 million, but
the CRER is available online, and it would behoove all of you out there to stop and read it. It is my favorite reading on the 21st of every single month. And I go down everything. And your chairman was fighting for you. In August, we almost had a knockdown drag out because she wanted more money for you guys. And I kept telling her, I could see from the CRER every month that you had additional money. And I kept showing it to her. And then we ended the year and the report shows. Again, read that out so the audience understands what the CRER prepared by BBMR, DOA, and Rev and Tax says as of September 30th. How much was still how much was available for Department of Corrections?
And I'll meet with BBMR and
read the number out so that the news media understands the number.
All I know is, Speaker, is
you have in the newspaper your statement that you were underfunded. Read the number.
I don't know, Speaker. You know, we didn't make these reports. When we do our expenditures and we get our reports back,
All right.
you know, it shows that we have a shortfall.
And
but-
it's a 1.7, just so that the media understands that. And the CRR is available online and can be confirmed. During the previous year, we had a special mention in the budget that $1.1 million was to be used for your medical agreement with GMH. Was GMH fully paid for in 17?
GMH, because we had the compact impact funds, we did pay for 16, they were paid, and I believe 17, we still owe some for 17.
But in the budget that we passed for 17, we put a special line in there that said $1.1 million was to be set aside for the specific purpose of paying
Right,
the GMH
right.
agreement. Was GMH paid that $1.1 million?
My understanding is GMH was paid, but there's still some payment pending for 17.
And how much did you receive in compact impact?
I believe total for 16 and 17 was about $3 million, I believe.
And have you asked the governor whether or not compact impact could be available, since more than half your population are FAS?
Well, I know that, you know, the good majority of the funding that covered for the renovation of post 17, 7, and 6, and likewise with the formation of the clinic and the MOU with GMH, a good portion of those funds did come from compact impact.
And did you ask for 18 for money from the compact to
Yes,
cover?
but I believe those funds were already earmarked for other areas as well.
But did you ask
Yes,
for
we did.
additional money?
We did ask.
And the amount, what was your budget approved for this fiscal year?
The budget approved for this fiscal year was 26,587.
And though I did not specifically put into there 1.1 shall be set aside for GMH, with 1.7 remaining from the previous year, and that being the 18 being an increase over 17, why wouldn't there be sufficient funds to pay GMH?
You know, Speaker, I'm going to have to find out where that 1.7 is because
But even just take the 26. The 26 is, in my math and my abacus, is greater than the 25.6. You had a larger lump sum budget. Where in that lump sum allocation did you place the GMH MOU?
For which one? The 26?
2018.
For 2018, we put it was in the original request at 29.
No, but when you got your appropriation and you sent down to BBMR your allocation for the year, how much and what priority level did you put payment for GMH agreement?
Well, GMH was high priority because of the consent decree.
And so how much has GMH been paid?
At this point in time, we still owe for 17. We did make payment processing right now, I believe, about $700,000 for 18. That is at DOA for payment.
There have been several circulars. One that came out 1801 from BBMR that imposed a 15% set aside reserve.
Right.
Was DOC subject to that 15%?
All agencies were subject to the 15%.
And how much is 15% of 26?
About $3 million.
Even if we had given you the 29, you'd still be down 3. And blaming it on our appropriation as opposed to saying that the 15% reserve was your $3 million loss.
But, you know, at least it'd be in the reserve. If we got 29 and if 15% was put in the reserve, at least You know, that's funds that we could use
that
when
would
we
be
had a shortfall.
3.7 that you wouldn't have, probably even greater amount. But the thing is that you had a lump sum budget, and the 1.1 or whatever amount you owed in the MOU to GMH, that should have been at the very, very top. Because yesterday I suffered 8 hours of hearings, and those two poor nurses sat here since 2 o'clock and didn't leave until 10 last night because they were crying for more funds. But you guys haven't paid your MOU. Your lump sum should have included and did include that amount because it was included in the previous year, and it could have and should have been paid for. So you have a 15% with $3 million that you have no access to. There was also the more recent BBMR circular that came out last week of the additional 8.7 that they've asked everybody to provide some belt tightening. What was DOC's response to the governor's request for belt tightening?
My response was we could not make any cuts. I did not submit. They asked us to submit a budget to reduce our expenditures by additional $2 million. I responded back, I cannot.
Okay. Can you provide us with a copy of that?
Sure.
And provide my office with or the chair copies of all the exchanges with the invoices that GMH has been sending you over the last year. You can
Sure.
block out the names of the patients, the amounts that they billed you, and how much you paid back.
Now, Speaker, in regards to inpatient care, that's not inclusive of the 3.3. That's additional cost. So if an inmate or a detainee gets admitted to GMH, that's above and beyond the 3.
I understand. I'm just saying, of the MOU, provide me with...
Okay, so
with
strictly the MOU, not individual patients
right.
admitted to GMH.
Someone earlier, your nurse talked about you had some chronically ill patients.
Correct.
Have you discussed with the governor and lieutenant governor the possibility of commuting the sentences?
Yes, we have, and I know we discussed that. Some of these individuals, Speaker, are in for pretty heinous crimes, and I don't think, with the type of crimes they committed, the community would be agreeable to their release.
And their illnesses, how debilitating is it, and how much of a threat would a bedridden person pose to the community, unless they were big drug lords? If their crime was some kind of violence and they're bedridden at this point, wouldn't they be better if we commuted those and saved you guys the...
Currently, we don't have any bedridden per se. We have individuals, and I guess without mentioning names, but
no, I don't want any names.
Individuals who are on dialysis, on cancer treatment, things like that. But in regards to actual bedridden, Joanne, I don't think do we have any actual bedridden patients? Yeah, not at the moment, but we have several cancer patients that are getting treatment, and hemodialysis patients as well.
Okay, and your nurse mentioned that there was no alcohol and drug drug counseling. Mr. Vega left just in time. But Dr. Timinglow, even when you were at mental health, when it was the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse.
Guam Behavioral.
I know
Right,
you guys
Department
tried
of
to change your name, but when
Right.
you were up there, you remember the exchange we had about when are you going to get a drug treatment and substance abuse treatment there, because the essay at the end of DMHSA was not San Augustine, it was substance abuse.
Right, right.
And has anything changed?
Over at Department of Corrections or Guam Behavioral?
Either one, to provide for counseling.
Okay, I can't speak regarding Guam Behavioral. Department of Corrections has the RSAT program, the Residential Substance Abuse Treatment Program. We actually should have a specialist either on staff providing services to the large population of people who are suffering from addictions. We don't have that at this present time. We have a couple of people who are trained under the matrix model, one who's actively performs, she's in parole, and then we have two that were trained serving under casework. But we need much more. I agree with you. And that's, I barely have enough support for my area. The substance abuse, I do all that I can with what I know, and I can work with substance abusers, but not at the numbers that we have. I don't have the numbers of people who are incarcerated for crime where they were under the influence and led to their crimes. So I don't have those numbers, but just based on the people that I see on a day-to-day basis, our numbers are 75%, maybe higher, of people confined with alcohol and other substance use problems. So I agree there, you know, if we can have a specialist who is there full-time and additional services like our NA and AA partners in the community. But more than that is for the ones with co-occurring, the ones who have both substance abuse problems, addictions, and mental health issues. Those, you know, we really need to have those
No, I
services.
understand. I was just trying to get to the point where
Right. We don't.
for years we have been, you and I have talked
had
about the fact that
conversations
when
about
you
that.
were at mental health, when it was DMHSA,
Right.
it didn't do it. It didn't
No.
establish it. It has no program, and to this day, even with the change to behavioral health and wellness, still doesn't.
Right.
So
They do have-
that is the problem that the executive is going to have to address.
Right.
I just wanted, Madam Chair, to make it clear. This year, the appropriation for mental health went up. It was a lump sum budget greater than the last year. They could have and should have made the payment to GMHA, though I didn't break down and specifically say 1.1 million. If they had set their priorities straight, it would have been paid because it was a greater amount, and especially since they ended the year with a $1.7 million. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let's go back to the slide deck, shall we? Can you please bring up slide 4? Okay, while they're bringing it up, slide 4 is the operations personnel decrease, and you listed that you have about 350 to 400 prisoners in the past, and now the prisoners today is 650 to 700. This increase is of concern to me because I'm wondering, was this a gradual increase or was this an increase within the past 6 months? Was it an annual increase?
Want to answer that?
Okay, good morning, good afternoon. Anyway, the increase in population is something that happens gradually.
Okay.
Last year, actually, we were actually about 750, and actually we're down now, but the number
Down
right
to
now is around.
700?
We were actually past 700, yes.
But now you're down
At
to...
one point, I believe in 2016, we were close to almost 800.
Okay.
You know, and our current
And
count.
how long was that duration that you were in, had
Our
800?
current count for the day, ma'am, is 657.
Okay, Cap, I asked you, how long did you have the capacity of 800?
It was for about maybe 3 months, give or take.
Okay.
It kind of fluctuated.
Okay, so your population size fluctuates.
Yes.
Because I was just wondering, in slide 21, if you can go to slide 21, please. You list the education level of the entire, previous slide. Right before there we go. You list the entire level of education for the entire population. And so right here you have 385. So I'm just trying to make these numbers jive that
Okay.
was presented here.
Yeah, I can explain that. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Okay, on the education, that is inmates.
Okay.
Okay, on the detainee side, those that are not convicted pre-trial, we don't offer services to them like GED and other options. So that right there is inmate population,
Okay.
in which casework only deals with inmates, convicted, those individuals who have been convicted and sentenced.
Okay. All right. Because it brought me to the parole services, which was slide 23. Next slide. There we go. Go back one. And then you had the total parolees. So I'm just trying to make sense
Okay.
of the numbers you list.
I can explain that. The parolees, the total parolees, ma'am, those are people that are currently released out in the community.
Okay.
Okay, they're on parole, serving their time in the community.
Are you accounting for the parolees into your operations personnel?
No, no, we're not.
slide- okay.
But the pre-parole numbers, ma'am, every inmate that's in prison really, at some point in their life, are going to be released at one point.
Right.
So they are actually considered pre-parolees, and they are assigned from the get-go. When they are sentenced, they are assigned a particular parole officer. So even if they have to do 10, 15 years, they already up front know who their assigned parole officers. And we refer to those as pre-parole
I see.
people.
Okay. So just to clarify, you have 385 inmates,
In the,
detainees.
okay, you want today's numbers, ma'am?
Yes.
Okay.
In this respective category, okay? Not,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, in today's count, we have 365 inmates
Okay.
and 292 detainees.
Okay.
Now, remember, in the detainee category, okay, that's even broken down even further.
Okay.
Because we have 11 immigration.
Okay.
We have about 31 of them are federal detainees. We have about 21 of them that are contempt of court, probation violators.
I see.
And then we have about 10 that are parole violators that are being held. So
I see.
that particular, we call them detainees.
Okay.
Because, their time is very limited.
Right.
Some are 10 days, 5 days, 15 days, as
So it
opposed to an actual
fluctuates.
inmate. It fluctuates. The contempt of court, parole,
Okay.
that pretty much fluctuate. Our inmates number are pretty steady.
Okay.
It's the detainee population that kind of goes up on a daily basis.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Can we move to slide 7, please? Now, Director, you listed the previous slide. You listed on RDO, sick leave, and drill 6 to 10 officers off duty. Why would you consider going to drill a factor? From my understanding, this is something that
Can I explain that?
can be used in advance to schedule your officers. Every new fiscal year, the Guard sends out, or the reserves send out, a notice to the employees for the whole scheduling of the year of when they would have drills. So how is that even a factor if you do your scheduling properly?
I'm going to let the warden answer that because warden puts the schedules together. So, warden? Or Captain Q?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair.
Good afternoon, Colonel Bora.
Right now, our officer count is significantly low, and we've put them in a long work hour shift, right? So when we try to make attempts to have these officers come in their day off to augment those going on drill services, right? Again, they turn around and say, hey, we're burnt out, and as much as I would like to support the operation, I got to have some time off. So again, we practically try to force these officers to come in. to cover these.
I understand, but I'm inquiring about the drill piece.
Yes, the drill.
Yeah, so,
Because I'm a reservist also, and yes, it's difficult to get officers to come in to cover down. We try to mix and match and have them give up their RDO or come in their RDO to augment those going on weekend drill, but it can become a taxing when we're adding more to the workload on these officers.
how many officers do you currently have on military status?
38. We have 38 Army, Air Force,
Okay,
combination, and of course me, Navy.
okay.
I represent
But
the Navy.
I'm under the impression that you are doing adequate planning because they do get employer notification.
Yes, we do the
a year in
adequate planning,
advance.
but then again, we get those unforeseen circumstances where those that are scheduled to come in to cover down aren't able to make it. So we're back to trying to find coverage again. So,
Okay.
and we have a small pool of officers to try and cover these reservists.
Okay. Thank you very much. Yes. Cap, go ahead and press the button on your mic, so.
Sorry, can I, okay. Now, our military personnel are not, all of them do not have weekends off on the regular roster. Some days they're off Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, they have other regular scare. Now, when it comes to their weekends, we attempt to ask them if they want to work on one of their RDOs to make up for that drill time. Some do, some don't. So those that are scheduled on a Saturday, let's say it's their scheduled day to work Saturday, but they have their drill. So we still need the body there, so we have to bring in other officers that may have already worked, or officers that are scheduled off that day, and bring them in to cover for those military guys. So, we don't want to hamper the military, the officers from taking their military drill, but, they are a vital part of our operation. So when that body goes to drill, and sometimes it's quite a few of them at one time, we have to juggle with the rosters, taking into account everyone's 12-hour shift and their assignment to make sure we have adequate manpower. So that's really what that means about that it does cost us some money to cover down.
Okay, thank you very much, Cap. On April 30th, 2017, we had the Department of Corrections Easter event, where you had 22 inmates and approximately 8 guards escorting these inmates to an event. And we wrote a letter to the Attorney General's office. And in that letter, we inquired about the law and the victim's advocate right. And I'm just going to read the Attorney General's response. Title 9, Guam Code annotated subsection 80.49, extension of limits of confinement for humanitarian reasons, permits the Director of Corrections to extend the limits of the place of confinement of a prisoner in certain circumstances, such as visiting a dying relative, attending a funeral of a relative, and obtaining necessary medical care. It doesn't discuss about a family reunion Easter event. The law further permits extended limits of confinement for any other equally compelling reason consistent with public interest and safety. In all these instances, the Department of Corrections is required to provide written notice to our office, this is the Attorney General's office, the Superior Court of Guam, and the Guam Police Department. DOC regularly complies with the notice requirements. However, in this particular instance involving the post-Easter 2017 event at the Dededo Sports Complex, we did not receive notification. And also, Director, it brings us back to what you stated in the media. Where this is an article from KUAM News. Other questions were raised. Was the Attorney General's office notified and the department informed the victim of these inmates? La Morena says in this case he used his sole authority to approve the activity. Now I just want to go over a little bit on your SOP. The ELOC SOP specifically references the requirements of the extended limits of confinement. And it requires an application document. It requires approval of the CCSD. It requires an agreement between the inmate. And then when we asked specifically, when we FOIA'd for these documents, we did not receive any of these things. More interestingly, when we asked for logs of transport or any logs at all, I mean, thank you so much for working diligently to get us what we requested. What was interesting is that you were missing the dates April 30th, May 1st, May 2nd, and May 3rd in these logs. So what we received was up to April 29, and then there was a stop, and it began back on May 4th. And so, Director, I bring this to your attention because the extension limits of confinement also comes in place with your protocol for transporting personnel, transporting inmates. And in this article, it says that these guards were only equipped with mace and a baton. But in your transport SOP, it requires your guards to be armed, and they speak about in the manner they should be armed. And this is an SOP that we are referencing since 1997. And so, in accordance with the law, Director, you did not properly vet this whole process, and there's a document of you signing along with Colonel Borja and Lieutenant Limo approving of this outing. And so this is a great concern because you're moving 22 inmates with 8 guards who are only armed with a mace and a baton into a public environment, which is the Dededo Sports Complex. And then there was an incident that occurred there where one of the inmates in question was in a zone where one of the family members of the victims was placed. And so I want to reiterate that this is a huge gap in your protocol. This is an outdated SOP. Lives, luckily nothing happened, but lives were essentially at stake here. Your guards were outnumbered. And so the inmate in question, I wanted to inquire, what is the classification and the security requirement for that inmate in question? Was he a maximum security inmate? Was he a medium 1, 2, 3?
He's in minimum out. He's in the Triple C.
Okay.
He is in the halfway house. He is eligible for parole.
Okay.
So that's the reason why he's in Triple C. You know, if you're going to cite the Attorney General's opinion, she also mentions, in her opinion, we believe that this and other provisions regarding victim notification are not implicated in the situation in question because the inmates that participated in the post-Easter event were never released from custody of the Department of Corrections into the community. Only an order of the court and the execution of the action of the governor, a decision by the parole board, or the termination of the prison term can change an inmate's custody status. So, although they were there, they were still in the custody of the Department of Corrections.
Yes, I understand that, but you did not do things in accordance with the law. And that's Title IX Guam Code annotated 80.49. And so I just wanted to point that out because there's, ever since the situation, then there seemed to be a certain trend for one reason or another. And so I just wanted to, the reason why I brought this up is because we want to make sure that the process that is put in place is followed. And if you feel that that process is not necessary, then we need to address it. If you feel the law is not necessary, then we need to address it. If the SOP from 1997 needs to be improved, then we need to address it. And so that's why we're here today, is to bring these into the light so that we can relook all of our procedures, our standard operating procedures and policies, and address them so that everyone is doing their due diligence. Because the trend goes now to other gaps in SOPs. I'll use an example, Justin Meno's case. In this article published on May 19, 2017, from the Pacific Daily News, Officer Limo specifically states, the officers didn't follow standard operating procedures for the special unit, where Meno was found unconscious in the yard on March 29. And so this is another issue with an SOP. And my question is, what is the SOP for this? What is the SOP when that Officer Limo is talking about in the special housing unit that was not done and was not followed amongst the officers and the supervisor at that time?
Yeah. Ma'am, I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question. You said what SOP?
Yes.
Okay. Post 6 has its own, just like any other housing unit, they have their own standard operating procedures.
Okay.
And I can't speak on behalf of what the former lieutenant said in a media release.
That's fine. I just want to know, what is your standard operating procedure for the special housing unit? And what if you find an inmate there that is beaten and unconscious? Do you have a SOP for handling of the victim and the handling of the evidence?
Yes, ma'am, there are. And of course, when the SOPs are created, they're created under the best circumstances possible, right? We look at the operations and we say, how are we to do certain things? SOPs, will not cover every single situation that occurs in that unit at that time. And on this particular case, there were unique circumstances that occurred that day that is not of a normal everyday operation. So there were certain things done in a way that may have deviated, but it was due to the nature of the incident or other factors that happened that day. Again, unfortunately, I can't, because we are still going through the criminal process, and we still have there's like several of the inmates right now are on trial, and other criminal. I can't divulge certain information at this time publicly because it may affect the case that's currently ongoing.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what one of your SOP states. And you can correct me, okay? Or you, if I'm wrong, tell me. This is Community Corrections Program 97 Housing Unit Officer. And it specifically states, and there's a list of things, no? The description of duties for the officer. Strip search inmates who return from work details, visits, and other official businesses. Secure and lock all doors. Supervise inmates. Make head count of inmates. Escort and accompany inmates to and from outside assignment when necessary and or short of manpower. So basically you have everything here that in the case of Justin Meno, there was a moment where he was alone. And so it looks like there needs to be a retraining program in place where the officers are retrained. And most of you are in the military, and rehearsals are very important when you are on a mission. And everyone at Department of Corrections that goes on duty is always in that mission mindset. They're always on alert. And so it is important that the officers know so that this incident doesn't happen again. Have there been any efforts in retraining officers and doing rehearsals of procedures and policies? And can you give an example if there have been?
Yes, ma'am. Again, as I stated earlier during the training,
Yes, I heard
segment.
about combatives training and special weapons.
Right.
Sort training.
And we've conducted training on head count procedures, everything pertinent to the function of a correction officer, back to basics, handling of restraints and handcuffing procedures. Again, revisiting the SOP, which no doubt is outdated, just like our 9419. So a lot of these things need to be addressed, and we're addressing it with training. And we do have a policy review board that's also working on our policy and updating these SOPs, because yes, some units have changed its designation. Right. What used to be MAX is now an admin segregation unit. So we are working on that. And again, a lot of training is being emphasized now after those recent incidents.
And do you document it, Colonel? Do you document
Yes,
that this
yes,
training
ma'am.
And
We
how
have those
often do
documented.
you perform the training?
Again, with respect to again, like overtime issues and et cetera, we conduct training like once, twice a week.
Okay.
At a platoon level. Okay, we whatever training we can get, with the help of the marshals, customs, GPD, we embrace it. Our training staff has really worked diligently to provide these training. And just most recently, again, the OCAT training, the mace training, baton training that we certified all the officers, which haven't had that kind of training in years. And to better prepare them for what's to come, the unforeseen circumstances that like happen at Post 6,
Yeah.
The SOP, yes, is in place, but again, like what Captain Anton Nugent said earlier, doesn't address the total operation of the housing unit.
Yes. But these are fundamental things that a
Yes,
correction
fundamental
officer
things
should have, right?
Yes.
It is my knowledge that if I'm a corrections officer, I want to make sure I have accountability for all the inmates. I want to make sure that I follow them, I have eyes on, I'm able to hear what is going on.
Yes, ma'am.
And so that's very fundamental. So that's really what I'm emphasizing here is the fundamental core concepts of being an officer should be reinforced, because in most instances, in the last two cases, they were not.
And
so,
again, the training that we provide is basically back to basics.
Okay.
Again, complacency will sit in, and then we just jar up their memory every now and then and provide these training. And as incidents occur, we harp on it and try to improve on how to approach it maybe differently to handle the situation appropriately. So again, it's work in progress.
But this is essential because it's
It
also
is essential,
about the
ma'am,
safety of the
of course.
officer.
So it's a continual process when we conduct these training.
And
It's
Senator,
essential.
I mean, we're not taking this lightly. As the warden had stated earlier, we sent two officers off island for advanced training, and they're currently training our officers. As Officer Sanchez, who is our training officer, stated, that we're doing a whole set of retraining for our officers. We're even assisting DYA. This week we were assisting DYA with their staff as well. So we try to collaborate with the other public safety agencies. The courts have been an excellent partner, likewise with GPD. But, in the last year, we've begun this retraining. We're implementing and we're planning now situational type training. And hopefully we'll get that going in the next few weeks. So, we're just, even when I came on board a year and a half ago, I mean, as we work together with the department, revisiting the SOPs, Captain Algon has been working on look at revising some of the SOPs, and so it's a work in progress. It's not that we've been sitting around. We've been actually working on it, and hopefully within the next year, we're going to see a lot of progress in regards of retraining our staff and refreshing them on the SOPs.
Okay. Something tangible. Okay. Thank you, Director. Thank you, Colonel Borja. I want to read an article from September 24, 2017. Justin Meno died of a tumor not from prison beating. That is the title. The medical examiner, Dr. Aurelio Espinola, said Meno had a tumor in his throat that had been present for a long time. Charges against the 3 men accused of beating Department of Corrections maximum security prisoner Justin Meno will not be upgraded to murder as his death has been ruled as undetermined. Meno did not die from injuries sustained or related to his beating. Instead, according to the medical examiner, Dr. Espinola, Meno's cause of death was asphyxia due to a tumor in his throat, which completely obstructed his airway. Espinola believes that the tumor in Meno's throat had been present for a long time. And so, if this is the case, I'm just thinking that if this person had a tumor so large in his throat that he died from it, that there should have been signs early on that this inmate was receiving some kind of medical care for this tumor. And so, can we have some clarification if Justin Meno went and sought or was receiving medical care for this specific tumor?
Ma'am, now I can't speak on his specific medical care of an individual. However, Justin was a detainee, all right? So when these guys come in and out of the jail, sometimes it's several weeks in between. When an inmate is sick, they put in a sick call. So they have to also take that proactive. If they're not feeling well, if something's wrong, they got to put that request in. The nurses and them spend most of the day dealing with those requests. If an inmate didn't make a request or there's no visible indication that there's something wrong, the chances of him seeing a doctor would be slim. And then the other thing is that this incident happened in March, and I believe he was in the hospital for several months before all of this, before he ultimately passed away. We on our side, we didn't have any indication that there was a medical issue, because again,
That's what I want to know.
he wasn't in our custody, he wasn't in our care.
Was there any sign prior to his beating that he was having difficulty breathing?
Not that we are aware of, ma'am. Not that we are aware of.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I know because of HIPAA you can't reveal specific things, but I want to ensure that there was a level of care given if there was. Because 6 months is a short amount of time for a tumor to expand, no?
Right.
The nurse is nodding yes and no. So thank you. So I would like to transition over now to a case that you probably can't talk about, but there's going to be a lot of questions about the SOP and your procedures and so forth. So you maybe can't talk about the specifics of the case, but you can at least discuss the procedures that are put in place. Okay? I'm going to reference this article from the Pacific News Center. And this is when they are discussing with the ME the victim that died recently under the care of Department of Corrections. And so in this article, Pacific News Center asks Dr. Espinola, so the police told you there was blood. Did they say who cleaned it up or how it was cleaned up? The ME responds, no, they don't know who cleaned it. Otherwise, they will tell me. And so my question is do you have a procedure or a process on how you get cleaning supplies to clean things up? Are these cleaning supplies logged? The blood was cleaned up. How do you account for articles with soiled clothes like fecal matter or even blood? How do you account for those? Do you put them into evidence? Do you document it? What is the procedure for that?
Okay, ma'am. Again, I understand where you're coming from on these questions, but I can't speak for what the Dr. Espinola released to the media.
I know, I'm not
Okay.
asking you about that, Cap. I'm
And-
asking you about the process
And
of
yes.
cleaning supplies being checked out, clothing accountability,
Okay.
documentation of clothes
Yeah.
with blood on it. What is your process for that?
Yes, ma'am. Each unit puts in a supply requisition, and supplies are delivered to the unit. All right. It is controlled by the officers. It is limited supply. All right. Inmates, detainees are issued uniforms, and they have uniforms. It's in their possession. So we don't inventory it every day. Once they're in our custody, we give them a shirt. It's logged in that they're given a shirt, and that's their shirt until they get released, at which point we take it back. Okay.
If they're in there for 7 days, they stay in that one shirt?
They have maybe 2 or 3 shirts.
I see.
That they're given. We do have a laundry. Most units will have a laundry detail, and there is washer and dryers located inside the block, and there is orderlies or inmates that are assigned to do laundry detail, so that we don't have everybody touching the washer machines and using the supplies.
And what about if clothes are that you receive have blood on it? Do the officers collect these clothes?
No, ma'am. The laundry is not collected by the officers. There are inmates in the block that are assigned details, and they collect laundry. There's a schedule on which cells are going to be doing the laundry for that day, and it's done. And it's given back to them at the end when it's been cleaned.
How are these inmates monitored?
There are officers on post that monitor them.
What do you mean by on post?
Well, ma'am, again, we're going back to the SOP, okay? When we do the SOP...
Because I don't see the SOP here about that. That's why I'm asking.
When we do the SOP, ma'am, we do it under best case scenario, all right? Unfortunately, like we pointed out earlier, we are short of officers, okay? Some of these SOPs require 5 officers to be on post. 5 officers. And they only run with 2 or 3 most times.
So these inmates, are they escorted?
We do escort them, especially when they come out of the unit. FDF is a contained unit, so most of the laundry is inside the block. It's within the block.
Can you just walk me through it? Can you walk me through it? Let's say that it's laundry day.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me the process, because I didn't receive any documentation of
Right.
the process, the officer's responsibilities.
Yeah.
So tell me paint the picture.
Most of the housing units have a laundry schedule, because obviously they can't all wash on the same day.
Okay.
So there's a laundry schedule. So it may be 5 cells at a day are doing their particular laundry. They collect their clothes, and it's given to the laundry detail, who in turn washes it. If they're washing it from another section, the officers inspect it before it's redistributed out. And then it's given back to the...
How do they collect the laundry? Do they collect it in a bin? Do they collect it in a laundry basket? How do they collect the laundry?
Plastic bag, ma'am. We have trash bags, and they collect it.
So-
And usually the inmates will write their names on it, and there'll be a laundry list, and they'll say 3 shorts, 2 pants for me, and then they take those
throw it in.
and they gets washed.
Okay, so there must be some kind of necessary tagging for these articles of clothing,
Yes.
no?
Yes, on paper. It's the inmates fill it out themselves.
I see.
Yeah.
So it's laundry day in my block,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm an officer,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a detail. How many people are on this detail for the laundry?
Usually one.
Okay.
One.
So I'm going to visually watch the inmate go down the block and receive items of clothing from the other inmates that are in a plastic bag with their name on it and description of each article that is in that bag.
No, ma'am.
No?
The officer may be there when they're collecting it, but there are 40 prisoners or so in the block. The officer's not going to be able to see every single piece of laundry that goes by or in the bag, but he may be there just monitoring them, collecting it, or even giving the instructions. Hey, laundry, get it out, and let's get it over here so it can get washed. But most of the inmates, they already work on a time schedule. I mean, it's already set down on what they do. So we're not standing there watching them every second of the day, especially if you only have 3 officers and I got to prepare for court run. I got to expect the child coming in. We have a control officer that cannot leave, right? So, and then he's got to do the service gate. So they're constantly moving about. They don't just stand in one location and guard somebody. They are moving around throughout that block. And if you only have 3 officers, and in some cases 2, then that's a lot of...
So you just trust the inmate to
We don't
perform
trust
the
nobody,
detail.
ma'am, but
It seems
if I
that
don't
way.
have all the resources, do I hold up court, or do I stand and watch the laundry being done? Do I strip search the inmate coming back from visitation, or do I watch the laundry? Do I feed the inmate, or do I watch the laundry? The officer has to make a decision on what he's going to do that's priority. I have 3 attorneys sitting at the door waiting to speak to their client. I got 4 probation officers that need to come in. It's visitation day. The officer has to decide, what am I going to do first? Right? It's priority. And if we only have 2 officers or 3 officers on duty, they got to go back and forth. Then you have inmates who may not be cooperating. They got attitudes. They got problems. The officer's got to go in there and do his head count every 1 hour. He's got to walk the range and double check everything. So these are a lot of things that are going on. And
Yes, I understand
and-
there's a lot of moving
and the-
pieces in the prison,
There's
right?
a lot of moving pieces there, ma'am. And again, yes, we would like to sit
And it's
there
a, you can
and
make it a
physically-
control, Cap, you can make it a controlled environment.
Ma'am, it is controlled, but even under the best circumstances, if I don't have all the resources we need to make it 100% control. All right, we don't have that resources. We don't have cameras in a lot of the blocks. There's no cameras there. All right, so the equipment doesn't even work. The locks are broken. The locks, we have a lot of things to take care of.
So
again,
you put inmates in cells with locks that are broken?
ma'am, again, there are a lot of things in the facility or even in housing units, and if we don't have the right officers, 5 officers, these units are designed with a lot of blind spots that require the officers to be moving around and looking at things visually. Okay, so again, if I don't have the 5, 6 officers,
So how do you improve it? How do you improve the process? How do
ma'am,
you-
we need 303 officers.
Other
is
than
what
the-
we need.
Other than that,
Okay.
there seems to be. It's almost like being a correction officer. You're juggling so many things, and you're putting the safety of the officer at risk, which is very important, and you're putting the safety of the inmate at risk, which is equally important. And
Ma'am,
we see these cases.
we
that
are improving it as best as possible, and contrary to what people may think, our prison is relatively safe. Okay, we do have incidents every now and then because we are running a prison. We are running a prison. These people don't follow the law, okay? And putting them in a building and all of a sudden expecting them to grow halos over their head overnight and be all nice and yes, sir, it doesn't work that way. They do violate the law. And like I said, unlike what people think, our number of incidents is actually down a lot compared to what the mainland prison or other prisons of our size are filling right now. So in general, we do a pretty good job of managing our population. Are we perfect? No. But we are constantly working on that, reevaluating our policies, training our staff, trying to make sure that we get better and better and we protect everybody that's there. We don't like it when someone gets hurt. Our mission is to protect them, and we have to constantly be hammering on that. But it is very hard if we don't have the right resources, and that includes buildings. I mean, our buildings are old and dilapidated. Our structure is just, our whole system is just old, and nobody pays attention to any of that until something goes wrong. And then all of a sudden, it's our fault because we didn't do anything. Our prison, we need a lot of help, ma'am, with money.
You know what's interesting to me?
Yes.
You're telling me that you have a shortage in officers. You're telling me that you're working on these procedures that you have no documentation for, and yet you still manage to get 8 guards to escort 22 inmates for a morale day at an Easter event. And so what this is saying is, for me, I'm thinking, well, if you can do a morale day for Easter event, and you take away 8 guards, and you're telling me that you only have 2 on a post sometime, or 5 on a post sometime, then we're not using the resources properly. I understand that, you know, that these are some of the constraints that the officers have to deal with, but it's managerial decisions like that that put these officers at risk and that are not using their resources wisely.
Ma'am,
And I just want to move down. Let's continue on, because I know you can tell me all of the challenges that the Department of Corrections face, and I'm not saying you guys are not, you know, you're not doing everything to the best of your ability.
Right.
But the managerial team, the leadership needs to start looking at the resources and also the policies and procedures and start training these officers and improving the process so that people are not put at risk. So I'm just going to go on to the next question in regards to this case, okay? All right. So the Pacific News Center reporter then asks Dr. Espinola, and I quote, "They said, well, we think 2 guys punched his face." And Dr. Espinola said, "No, they told me the story. They did not say they think. They told me he had a quarrel with 2 people. I said maybe these 2 people just boxed with him, but they did not injure him so much." Pacific News Center goes on to ask, "Do you think it would have been more than 2 people that would have attacked him based on his injuries?" Dr. Espinola responds, "Oh yeah, more than 2. And so it brings me to the question, how many people, what is the maximum amount of people that you put in a cell? And do you place them all within the same, I guess, level of classification or violation, what they're in for?
Yes, ma'am. Generally, there's 2 men to a cell. However, because our numbers are, our population has grown, there are times when there are 3 people in the cell. Okay.
So 3 people max.
3 people in a cell. We've gone as more as 4 in some cases in the past. However, these inmates are not in the cell locked in 23 hours a day. They're generally out. Their cell doors are open. They're allowed to move around within the day room, watch TV, outside for fresh air, or they go to court or other runs they have to go. But in some cases there are 3. There are 2 in other cases. We do have ways of segregating as much as we best can, but again, with the number of prisoners that we have, it makes it tough to separate everybody all the time. Now, if we have information that there's a conflict, and we're made aware of these things in advance, and then we make every possible effort to move them, transfer them from between facilities. We do everything we can if we have any kind of prior knowledge of any kind of issues between the inmates themselves. Okay, and again, I know you're citing the newspaper, ma'am, but I just want to be cautious on the newspaper, because they don't have the whole story of everything that has transpired. And again, because this case is ongoing and GPD is still looking into it, and even internal affairs, we're still asking questions and gathering our information. I can't come out, especially in this forum, and say what we have or don't have. And
I'm not asking you to do that.
I just have to be very careful on.
This is strictly policy and procedures.
Right.
Okay. You have a lights out policy. In your lights out policy, it states from 2200 to 0600 hours is lights out. But it doesn't state the requirements of the officers on duty, and it doesn't state, not in any of the SOPs, it doesn't state this, and it doesn't state what happens when lights go on, the accountability process. And so can you just walk me through that?
Okay. The warden, you want to handle this?
Ma'am, this is Captain Kirwa. On lights out, actually, is commonly called lockdown, lights out.
Okay.
A head count is completed and submitted to the control officer. It's documented, blotted as to the time it was reported, the officer that reported it, and of course the actual time that it was reported. And what lockdown means is that that's it, movements are controlled.
Stops.
There's no more movements. Lights out, it's time to sleep.
Yes.
Okay?
A head
So no
count,
activity, nothing. Everything ceases.
and when you do the head count, is this before you go lights out? You do your head count?
Yes, ma'am. It
And-
is one of our official head counts
Okay.
at the time.
Do you call them by name? The inmate by name? How do
Yes,
you-
ma'am. They're
Oh, okay.
supposed to stand there, identify the inmate one by one.
I see.
Name on the head count sheet. Every unit has a head count sheet.
Okay.
So the officer takes that name and verifies it with the person standing or laying there. It's a standing head count
Okay.
before
And
they go to sleep.
do the officers have any responsibility at that time?
Yes,
From
ma'am.
22 to 0600?
The accountability of all prisoners, that's their responsibility, main responsibility, of course.
And how do
then
they-
they ensure that no other activity is being conducted, that everybody is where they need to be
So
in
they-
their area.
They rove the unit. They rove the unit. They'll go up and down and ensure.
Yes, ma'am. And make spot checks throughout the
night.
the dark hours, every half hour. It's
Every 30
reported.
Okay. And
As-
then when at 0600 hours, can you explain to me the process there?
Ma'am, at 0600 hours is what we commonly call as reveille. They normally wake the prisoners up, ensure that they conduct their personal hygiene, start cleaning the areas, and get ready for the movements scheduled for that morning. Mostly medical appointments, court runs, meals are being delivered, things of that nature.
Do you have head count during that time as well?
We do now, ma'am.
You do not. When did you start doing that?
Actually, we've always had reveille head count, but now we force them to physically stand and be accounted for.
Okay, thank
And
you.
it's still called standing head count, ma'am. Not lying down, but standing up, actual standing up, to ensure that they're alive and well.
The official head counts are also in the Executive Order 8819, which is at 2200 and 0300, 0530, and 1000 hours, to include census count, which is other hours.
And now you practice the standing head count.
Yes, that's 0600.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Captain Kirigua and Lieutenant Lizama. Thank you. Okay, this would be our last line of questioning for the most recent event that took place, which is the female prisoner that was assaulted. And so I just want to know, in light of everything, the request of the attorney was to relocate her. And Cap, you said yourself that if an inmate is in danger or in fear for his or her life, that you do what you can to put them in an area that you deem safe, that you determine as safe. So has this been done? Were you able to do this?
You can answer it?
I could, yes, ma'am. You know, the female unit only has 2 wings. It's a very small unit, so you either move them in the one wing or you move them to the other wing. But in this particular case, yes, we have moved this person to another section of the unit.
All right. Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to thank all of you for coming here today. I'd also like to thank the Department of Corrections personnel and officers for their willingness to serve those that, essentially have harmed society or someone in one way or another. It's truly a humbling service to do, right? To be able to risk your life for those that are a harm to the society. So I thank them for their service. I do want to make you aware of the next steps forward. There are several instances that can be improved, and we discussed a lot of the progressive actions that you've taken moving forward and within Department of Corrections. And so I'd like to ask that you work on these items, and then you perhaps by the end of February next month, you can start producing some of these products to be more tangible, like your training requirements, your manuals, right? So your combatives manuals, your evidence handling manuals, and so forth, that we can have something tangible, right? That we can have something that if an officer doesn't know what to do, they have a reference, because and you are very well aware these SOPs are out of place, and there's plenty of gaps in a lot of these things. And now your standing head count, if you can also include that in your SOP in the manner that you train your officers, it's good to show that the Department of Corrections is doing its job in making sure that the officers are trained, what kind of training that they're receiving, and also the procedures in the manner that they must handle certain situations. I know everything is not exact, but at least it's a reference that, oh my gosh, if I find someone laying here tied up, first thing I'm going to do is do what? I'm going to call my supervisor, I don't know, call for QRF, quick reactionary forces, to come out here and see what we can do. So something of that nature. There's logs missing from the date in question of the Easter event, April 30th all the way to May 3rd. So if we can have a copy of those logs. Also, the manner in which you divvy out articles of clothing and cleaning supplies. Clearly, and what we received is seems like there's some kind of, I don't want to say it, but really it looks like a cover-up, that's for items to be missing, inmate to be found dead, no blood to be found anywhere, clothes are changed. There's something going on. It's a cover-up, it's the truth. And so I think that you need to look at these things and see what you can do to prevent this from happening in the future. And then also a plan of, we're getting a cut. You're saying that you wrote a letter or a memorandum to the governor saying that you cannot cut any further, but a plan with limited resources. Last year you sent 8 guards out, but you're still short officers on a morale event. And so, this is part of the leadership responsibility to come up with that plan. So 5 simple items to see if we can meet again in February, perhaps just a discussion amongst us, and then documentation to support showing Department of Corrections is moving forward with its due diligence. I want to read with you what we will do in regards to this oversight hearing. And this is referencing the Civil Rights of Institutionalized Persons Act. In subsection 1997C, intervention in actions, discretionary authority of Attorney General, preconditions time period whenever an action has been commenced in any court or United States seeking relief from egregious or flagrant conditions which deprive persons residing in institutions of any rights, privileges, or immunities secured or protected by the Constitution or laws of the United States, causing them to suffer grievous harm, and the Attorney General has reasonable cause to believe that such deprivation is pursuant to a pattern of practice of resistance to the full enjoyment of such rights, privileges, or immunities. The Attorney General for or in the name of the United States may intervene in such action upon motion by the Attorney General. So we are going to write a letter to the U.S. States Attorney General, the United States Attorney General, and just give them our findings and ask them to make the determination if any of these instances are in violation with the Civil Rights Institutionalized Persons Act. Just so I want you to know that that's what we're going to be doing. Okay? Just swing it. once again, I'd like to thank all of you for coming today, and thank you for preparing the PowerPoint and providing all the documentation these past couple of months that we've asked for. I know it wasn't easy, and I know it was a lot of work, so thank you for taking the time to do that. It is now 4:02 p.m. The Committee on Housing, Utilities, Public
Senator,
Safety,
can I just,
and Homeland Security.
I with all due respect,
Yes,
the
yes,
men
Director.
and women who work at DOC are hardworking, dedicated individuals. It's not, it's very difficult being a corrections officer. And, I admire them for their dedication and the work that they do. We're dealing with a facility at DOC that was built in the 60s. We have converted what used to be classrooms into housing areas. We do what we can with what we have and what resources we have. We would like, your participation in what we do. You came to visit us when you first came into office, and you could only stay with us less than an hour. We'd like you to come down and see what the facility is like, what our officers, what our people face on a daily basis. It's easy to sit up there and just say what you want to say without having to see what we go through day after day, Senator.
Okay.
Our officers ask me on a constant basis, what happened to your legislation for AB 86? It's not an easy job. We have to deal with 700 to 800 people on a daily basis. Shortage of manpower, shortage of funding. We need your support. As our oversight chair, it is your responsibility to help us so we can accomplish our goals. It's easy to point fingers, but sit down with us. We know we're not perfect. We know we have issues, but we need the cooperation of our lawmakers. That's your responsibility as a lawmaker, to help the department overcome its shortcomings. Yes, okay, we may have made some errors, but as these are my line guys. Everyone here faces the realities of working in a prison every day. I have to work with every individual here on a daily basis. Are we perfect? No, we're not. Do we need a new facility? Yes, we do. Do we need more manpower? Yes, we do. Let's work together, Senator. Let's not be fighting each other. I don't want to be here fighting each other. Let's sit down and work together so we can make this department the best it can be. Are there going to be violence in prisons? Senator, go online, Google it. Every day there's going to be altercations in prison. That's what people are there for, because they've committed crimes. They've committed crimes. We can't watch every single individual. I have officers who get head-butted, who get punched, who get spat at, who are threatened. Their lives are threatened on a daily basis. If you don't bring this in, I'll make sure we're going to go after your family. That's why I'm losing 30 officers this year, Senator. It's not an easy job. But you as a lawmaker, work with us. I don't want to be confrontational, but you know what? Let's sit down at a table and let's talk. Let's see what our shortcomings are, and let's work it out. That's all I'm asking for, Senator.
Thank you, Director. Please don't.
And I'm going to fight for these people that work at DOC, because I work with them every day. I get radio calls, I get radio checks 2 in the morning on telling me what happened in the shakedown, what was found, what was not found. And I will fight for these people because they're hard-working, dedicated individuals, Senator.
Thank you, Director.
Ma'am, could I just add on to this, just real
Sure,
quick?
go
to
ahead.
try and, yes, everything has been said. Everybody has been doing good so far. Of course, we are called the stepchild of law enforcement and unsung heroes. We are the bottom of the totem pole, criticized about whatever we do. It is a thankless job. Okay, we're used to it. But we will still do our job because we swore to protect and serve our island, because there is no one else that will walk in our shoes. Throughout my career, there was one old lady that said recently, for the very first time, as I was walking out of the store in my uniform from a 10-hour shift, she said, "I am proud of you." And the only one that ever told me, "I am proud of you and what you do," was my mother. I was so shocked that a stranger would even say, "I am proud of you," even after all of the media coverage about DOC. I've been employed with DOC for 28 years, and I have seen so many changes, and for the better. The population back then was only about 200 inmates. We had a lot of supervisors, warden, 5 captains, 16 lieutenants, 18 sergeants, 30 CO3s, 30 CO2s, and 100 CO1s. We had a lot of brand new vehicles and sedans. But a few years later, a lot retired, resigned, and were terminated. Then we were short of personnel again. Every day I would hear the officers saying, "I could feel it today. I could feel it in the briefing room." I, as a new officer, don't even know what they're feeling, okay? But then I knew they were talking about how an officer was killed in the line of duty at DOC. I asked myself, am I dying today? Why did I choose this job? The work is easy, but it's the people that you work with that make it hard for you to work. At this point of my life, I said, I need this job, and I need the money to support my son, so I'm going to work hard just like my mom. My mother said, you have to work hard to survive, and don't be choosy about the job. Always pray when you go to work, because God is watching over you. So this gave me the strength to stay on this job. My father called me up. He was staying in North Carolina. He disapproved for me to become a corrections officer because he was a military police. He said, you should be a police, not corrections. He said, it is a very stressful and dangerous job. You got to be exercising and alert at all times. I said, let me just try it. Okay, because not too many people want to work at DOC because they know the history of DOC and the caliber of inmates that we have. It was far worse back then because the inmates were more brutal and violent than they are now. You could feel the darkness and see evil far worse beyond what you could imagine. Those inmates that we dealt with. I was only in my 20s when I first started, fresh out of a formal corrections academy at GCC. Learning about their constitutional rights was one thing. But when I started working at DOC, it was a totally different ballgame. I was very eager to learn everything I could about the job, and I had the passion to learn because I was young. I was full of energy. I want to learn. The prisoners were more violent back then and disrespectful, calling us names, calling me all kinds of names, from you're a B, you're a this and that. There were more contraband made, like homemade shanks, homemade brew. More disturbances occurred on a daily basis, dealing with the behavioral clients. New confinees were highly intoxicated and high on illegal drugs. I just walked in through Central Control one day and saw one inmate who was bashed on the head with a mop stick and blood spurting out of his head. I remember responding to Post 17, in which an inmate was found lying on a pool of blood, or an inmate batting another inmate on his head with a baseball bat during recreation. trying to control a 6-foot female client who was always belligerent and combative. It took 4 male officers to restrain her and control her because she would stab officers with anything sharp. We had a lot of rehabilitation programs back then, like education, forensic, arts and crafts. Now we only have religious services, recreation, library, community corrections, and so on. In 1997, they burned the Post 6 building, and officers were transported to GMH due to smoke inhalation. Almost one died. Thankfully, another inmate saved him. Then DOC took over detention facilities in Agana and Mingilao, which was the Territorial Detention Center. Used to be run by GPD, but we took over on an MOU. We were also watching federal prisoners and the influx of illegal Chinese immigrants who kept coming in boats by the thousands. We were watching them at Mingilao, in which they called Tent City. Likewise, the female population also rose to 100. We had so many escapes back then, and we went on search parties just to look for them all around the island. These were the challenges back then. Most inmates and detainees play mind games. Manipulation is always a part of their life in prison, and they will always do it. They will play with your mind and try to profile you and what kind of officer you are. Like they say, never trust anyone in prison, and this is very true. Today, most of the inmates and detainees are more respectful than back then. There are only a few that are challenged, and those are the ones that need more counseling and treatment. We need more rehabilitation programs. I am sure at this time that there is a reduction of contraband due to the daily shakedowns, as mentioned earlier. The challenges we face now are as follows. The population increased to now, as Cap said, it went up, or it went down to 600, but it goes up and down. Increase in arrestees daily brought in highly intoxicated or under the influence of drugs. The number one choice of drugs on island, ice. That's the Schedule 2. Increase in behavioral clients, and this is very, very scary. They are so violent that it's something new to us that we're just looking at them like how to control them and what to do. So they are taken to GMH and then referred to behavioral. We also call Dr. Taimulu for her opinion on it and recommendation. And of course, they brought up the shortage of manpower. The hiring of correction officers must be continuous until such time we are back on 8-hour shifts. We only have 201 officers, that includes parole officers, and 17 civilian staff. We need more staff, such as more caseworkers and parole officers. Back then, there was 20 parole officers back then, and maybe 10 caseworkers, just so you'll know. We need a new prison facility, as mentioned, to accommodate at least 700 male prisoners for what we have now, and maybe 100 female prisoners, because we already reached around 67, the highest that I've seen. And of course, this is in progress with the grants that I heard of. We also need a concrete wall built all around our perimeter, about 15 to 20 feet high. This will really help, but of course, money is the issue. We need to ensure that there's enough supplies also to accommodate the current population. We are also facing the challenge of our economy and the projection to cut costs due to the new tax reform. Every now and then you would hear on the news that a correction officer was assaulted, and that does happen. And you know very well, our job is very dangerous. It's just that to really see it, you have to be with us on duty to really experience what we go through. The goal for correction is to rehabilitate the inmates and detainees. What makes me feel like we did our job? It is when the inmate does not get back into the system and turns his life around by becoming a law-abiding citizen, getting a job, and getting an education. It is one thing for an inmate to serve their time and get released, but when they return to jail, it means they are not ready for society. It means they have not been rehabilitated to say no to drugs and to say no to crime. As a community, we are supposed to help those who gets released and give them a second chance to turn their lives around. How about their families? Are they helping them to do better? Are they giving up on them and just letting them be homeless out in the streets? Because when I look at all those prisoners inside, they are like our children, walking to the dining hall or to get their medication. I tell myself that is someone's son or daughter walking, someone's brother or sister, someone's father or mother, and so on. Why are they here? Why did they make the wrong choices? I would always counsel them as a group, and I would tell them, when you get out, get a job, go to school, and try not to come back. Help your family, parents, spouse, and children. There's always something to do because housework is never done, and you know that's true, right? I would tell them all of the drugs and alcohol you are consuming is slowly killing you inside, so make your choices. Do you want to live long or not? Think about your family and not just yourself. Be responsible. If they listen to what I tell them, then they are not back in the system. It is tough out there to find a job here in Guam, and that is not an excuse. Chamorros are hard workers and they live off the land. You could farm or go fishing, and I always tell these inmates, there's no excuse why you cannot find a job. There's always something to do. What I would like to see, it is for the new prison reform to be implemented so that we could reduce our population, reduce recidivism, and cut our costs. This way, we will be able to rehabilitate those who have longer sentences. Likewise, also for those who have been incarcerated for more than 15 to 20 years with parole, that they will be released. Those who are elderly and have severe medical issues should be released on parole. First-time offenders to be given a chance. Those who are on work credit or work release to be given 1 day off for every 40 hours work that they perform, and so on. Those who committed a crime at the age of 18 to be given a second chance after serving a year. All I ask from our leaders and all of our leaders is for your support to help the Department of Corrections to fulfill our mission and our goals, public safety. And this is what, I mean, everything that everyone is talking about here is so very true. Everything is being brought up, and I understand you're bringing up about SOPs. It is there, but we also need the manpower that's on the SOP that tells us this is how much we need in the unit, and this is the guidance of what we're supposed to do. So we do have the SOPs. That is your question. And the officers are always told to read the SOPs. Now, if not, we always tell them, if you have any problems, call us, your supervisors. Thank you, ma'am.
Can I just add something real quick?
Sure, Colonel, yes, go
You know,
ahead.
to get it's unfortunate that you see a lot of the frustrations out on the table now, and yes, everything that's related is true. When you have a facility in the middle of Guam, a main road running right by our facility, an easement that caters to private residents, it's a very difficult tasking. And I salute all the men, women, and the civilian staff that at the end of the day, in spite of it all, we make it happen. And sorry to drag you through all this as well, but if you come and pay us a visit, we can actually relate more in our environment rather than here in this legislative hall. So again, we invite you to come up and feel and share the experiences that we encounter every day. And again, you see the frustration and all these armchair quarterbacks that love to call shots from the sideline, but when they're in the thick of things, it's a very difficult tasking. So, thank you.
Thank you, Colonel. You know, I just want to say one thing before we close. Please do not make this a divisive topic where it's me against Department of Corrections, because that is really not the case. As a matter of fact, you know, I even submitted my name as a volunteer at DOC. So it is not, it's not that for whatever reason, there's no division here. I do want to help. Otherwise, I wouldn't volunteer myself. Also, you want me to come and visit again? I will come and visit again. You want me to help and sit at the table and find answers? I will help. I tried very hard to fight for your budget. You don't need to see what I had to go through, but it was very, very strenuous on my part, and we only got what the little we could get. And Senator, Director, you know the dynamic of that. So it has nothing to do with, I do not think that Department of Corrections is doing a good job. That is absolutely not the case. You know, I applaud you for everything that you do. I mean, you're sacrificing your life for these people. You're putting yourself in harm's way. It's like you're on a deployment for 20 years of your life. And you don't even have, you're limited to the weapons you can carry in certain units. You can't carry a 9mm or a weapon with you. What do you have? Sometimes you don't even have your baton in some instances. Which is why I was happy to hear that you're getting combatives training, because that's essential. And, Colonel, you mentioned the challenges of being put in a residential area. I have been looking on our island at Chamorro Land Trust property to see if we could relocate the prison and where would that money come from. So maybe it hasn't been in your purview, but I have been trying to see what can we do, how can we help. And that's the only thing I ask myself every time I see a situation come up in the committees that I chair.
You know, ma'am, I'm just going to interject.
So it's not a situation where it's divisive, and it's not me against you. It's absolutely not.
Then Senator, work with us, okay? You know what? I remember when I first met with you and I came to your office. Director,
can I just please finish, and I'd like to close.
Well, you know, this is a public hearing, so I'm public, so I'd like to say something. You know, when we first met in your office, and like I said earlier, you know, we're not perfect. We deal with what we have. And I told you, I've been on the other side. I've been an oversight chair. And I work with my agencies. I called them into my office and I said, what's your problems? What can I help you? How can I help you? It's easy to point fingers. And you know, today was just all pointing fingers. We know we have inconsistencies. We know we're not perfect. But you need to work with us. You need to say, hey guys, you know, I see some holes there. Let's try to, how can we work together to mend those holes? Rather than being an adversary. I mean, today it was strictly adversarial on your part.
Well, I'm not the one that's yelling.
You know, if we can sit down, come to my office. I'll come to your office. We'll bring everybody. And let's talk about what our issues are at DOC and how we can work and how we can collaborate.
Yes.
I mean, we're collaborating now with a bunch of different agencies, a bunch of different NGOs, and we're doing great things at DOC, things that were never done before I came.
Yes.
I mean, we're seeing more things for our clients. We're seeing more training for our officers. And you know, I tell you, every day, I love my job. And it's these dedicated people that are sitting here today and those who watch the officers and our civilians that drive me every day. I even ask the warden, 3-4 times a day, I do my perimeter checks. Ask Lieutenant Lizama. I go around DOC and do my perimeter checks because that's part of my job. My job is to help the officers do their job. And that's what we all need to
Okay.
do at this table, Senator.
Okay. Thank you very much, Director. I don't want to go back and forth, but it is now 4:27. I want to thank you all for coming. And yes, Director, I'm going to be knocking down your door tomorrow and saying, "Let me in." Thank you. This oversight hearing has now come to a close.